Hello, everybody, and welcome to the In Conversation series, our series exploring the makings of our exhibitions. In this case, we're talking about Deepfakes, Art and Its Double, an exhibition at EPFL Pavilions, Amplifier for Art, Science, and Society at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, EPFL Lausanne, on view from September 17th, 2021 till February 6th, 2022. My name is Monica Antohi. I'm communications lead with EPFL Pavilions, and today we're welcoming Terry Kilby, a 3D capture artist and aerial photographer specializing in the documentation of cultural heritage sites. Terry's a pioneer in the burgeoning drone industry of the late 2000s and has written several books, magazine articles, and case studies on the topic over the last decade. His work combines elements of aerial photography, terrestrial-based LiDAR, and custom-built camera systems to capture high-resolution 3D models of panoramic images of the sites he documents. He also leverages his background as a software developer to create public experiences around the assets that he captures. The reason why we are speaking with Terry today is his work, Speaking Back, which is an interactive 3D model of the Robert E. Lee Confederate statue and plinth in Richmond, Virginia, which was taken over by the Black Lives Matter movement in protest of the killing of George Floyd in 2000. This work, which was co-produced in collaboration with EPFL Pavilions, is featured in our current exhibition, Deepfakes, Art and Its Double. Hello, Terry, and welcome to the In Conversation series.
Hi, Monica. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you making the time.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here with us today. First of all, before anything else, I'd like to do a quick intro of your work, a quick overview of your work, so we can set the framework for the conversation for the rest of our conversation today. Let's watch a quick drone video capture of the site and see a bit of your work.
Sure.
What do we have here, and when was this captured?
Sure. I actually visited the site three times total now, with one more trip planned. This particular video was captured in August of this year. You'll notice the metal fencing that's up around the outside of the circle. They actually shut off public access to the site in late January of 2020. So nobody's been able to get in. It's kind of sat dormant. And it's really a shame, because this was a congregation area. This was a meeting place. This was a public space where all the protesters were getting together and voicing their opinion on what's going on in this world right now. And it's really kind of sad that they were shutting this down, oddly enough, 2 days before the beginning of what we celebrate here in the States is Black History Month.
Right, and then what we're looking at here are your drone capture videos of the site, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the site was, every time I visited it was a little bit different. The graffiti evolved each and every time I visited, the graffiti had evolved on some level, and they all kind of had their own mood and feeling too. The first time I scanned it, it was very much about the charge. They were getting out there, starting the fight. You could kind of feel that type of energy. And by the last time I got there, it felt like defeat, because defeat on the side that lost, because everything was faded and it was shut down, and it was days before the statue was actually removed. So yeah, each time had a very unique experience.
I see that, and what we have on site, what we have at EPFL Pavilions, is basically two versions of your scans, one from 2000 summer and one from January 2020, and then another one from the January 2021. What we haven't been able to see or feel or hear is the sound that comes with the installation. So let's kind of bring that in, and then we go from there.
You're fucking ahead! Take that badge off! Everything in fucking pants! What fucking time is it? It's not even a clock! Fuck you! What fucking time is it? You're a bitch without that badge! You're nothing without your fucking badge! Look at what you're protecting! You fucking coward! What the fuck?
So Terry, the on-site installation carries with it a lot more weight, as it is also sonified, and the sounds are recording during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 and 2021. We're not playing the sound of the installation through the entire interview because it's disturbing as you've it's disturbing in many levels. But I think it was important to give the weight of not just the video, but also the sounds and the feelings and the passion around this monument and this installation specifically. So at this point, I would like to actually dive into the conversation that you and I had when you came and visited the EPFL Pavilions, the on-site interview that we did, and the walking us through your thinking process and creation of this installation.
Sure, it'd be great. I had a great time sitting down with you for that, and yeah, it was wonderful.
Thank you. Let's watch the video.
Thanks.
So I want to talk a little bit about who you are. How did you get into 3D scanning and photogrammetry, and why is that an important aspect of your work? What brought you to that, and how did you get to do this? So a little bit of introduction.
Sure. It's kind of a long, winding story, to be honest with you, but I'll give you the abbreviated version. I've always been into photography. Kind of grew up as a skateboarding punk rock kid in America, and I was the one that was always filming everybody skating, taking the pictures.
Those cool shots from like...
Yeah, a lot of fisheye lenses, things that look like Beastie Boy album covers and whatnot. So I've always had an interest in that, and that's always been one of my creative outlets. And I've also always been into remote control, vehicles, be it cars or airplanes or anything. I grew up doing that with my father. So flash forward to 2009, and this brand new concept of civilian drones was just on the horizon. And my famous quote at the time was, "Oh, this is something that'll cost me $125 and take a weekend of time, and that'll be it. I'll be done." Flash forward to a decade plus later, and this is what I do for a living.
It's still not done. It's kind of become your profession. That's kind of what makes you happy.
Yeah. So I kind of got started in the drone world pretty early on, and by just the grace of good luck, there happened to be one of the top photogrammetry firms in the country that was in the same little town right outside of Baltimore that I lived in.
How special is that?
That's very special, very lucky. And they were fantastic. They kind of took me on, became a mentor, brought me under their wing, and showed me a few things very early on before the photogrammetry bug kind of took hold across the country.
Yeah.
This was before Pix4D and Drone Deploy and all these, kind of drone specialized companies kind of really came about. So I started off using, Agisoft. It was called Photoscan back then. It's called Metashape now. Eventually moved into reality capture when that became a thing. Mm-hmm. And just kind of get started in it early. And for me, it was all about documentation. Yeah. Documentation in a new way. And it's almost always either historic sites or developers who want to reimagine the future. So I always think of it as a time machine. I'm either looking backwards in time or forwards in time with a lot of my work.
Yeah, I mean, this is perfect spot for it within our deepfakes art and its double, as we're kind of looking back, but through new perspective, through all of these new technologies, we're kind of projecting it into the future. So it's a great fit, I would say. So we're sitting in front of your exhibit, your installation. So do you want to walk us through a little bit why this?
Sure.
And how long did it take, and why specifically this project?
Sure.
And then we'll take it from there.
Okay. At the time that this was going on, the world was in lockdown. You know, we didn't know what was going on. We were just getting into summer of 2020. We had basically spent the entire, winter lockdown. It was, a very difficult time. Everybody was, stashed away behind closed doors, and we were living vicariously through other people's social media feeds.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends live in Richmond. I was dating somebody at the time who formerly lived in Richmond, was an art museum director there, and ran a museum very close to this monument. And she started to tell me stories of what it was like living close to Monument Row and working in this area, and this kind of feeling of always being watched. And suddenly we started to see the protests taking place, and we started to see the graffiti going on, and I knew this was a transitional moment in our American history.
Massive.
Yeah. My original idea was that I would show up. Luckily, I was there in time to catch it before it was taken down. I thought I was only going to have one chance to do it because it was all the other monuments had already started to come down. I think the first time I scanned this in June of 2020, the two of the monuments had already come down, and the rest of them would be down within a week of the first time I scanned this. What I didn't realize at the time was that this monument in particular was owned by the state and not the city. So they had to go through a completely different process.
That's why it took so long.
That's
for the
exactly
courts
why.
So as we're speaking right now, we're basically 2 weeks since this monument has come down. So
Yes.
we're right at the cusp of actual history being, happening in front of us.
Yeah.
So, but we're talking about this particular monument of Robert E. Lee and this whole Black Lives Matter movement around it, and why is that important? And after everything that's happened with George Floyd the year before, and all the police brutality and the inequality that we know as Americans, we see it every day. So this is not just a scanning of a monument.
Right.
This is scanning a time in history.
It is.
So what pulled you? I understand what would pull me, but what pulled you to it?
Well, I knew that this was a transitional moment in our history. Right after the George Floyd incident happened, America was heartbroken. There was a divide that was getting even wider within the country, and a lot of it manifested itself in these protests that were taking place in Richmond. And this was the voice of the people expressing themselves right then and there on the spot daily. I cannot tell you how much this graffiti changed from one visit to the next. My only hope, feel free.
We can go to the next one if you like.
Tap another one. So it's a completely different set of graffiti. You'll notice that there's different banners that are hanging. There was and each one of them kind of had its own emotion. The first one was I know. Everybody here points out the French. There's French all around it. So each time I visited it, it really took on a different feeling. This one was taken in January. You can actually see right here, if we turn around, there's actually an old Christmas tree that somebody had turned into. Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of this particular scan. There's a Christmas tree that somebody attached a mannequin to the top of and kind of gave it the Black Lives Matter, the Black Power salute there. I knew that this was I scan monuments for a living. It's part of what I do for a job. But they're never in the state. And when I saw this, I wasn't hired to go do it. This was my own personal artistic outlet. And it's about a 3-hour drive for me to get down there. And I actually went down there 3 times total to do this. And I plan to get it one more time as soon as I get home
For what's left?
What's left, yeah. So the statue itself is gone.
Who watches the Watchman?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite pieces. And the nameplates on both sides are now gone too. So those are all gone. The plinth itself, from my understanding, will be repurposed.
Okay.
They are talking about that. I know they set a new time capsule into the monument. So they are planning on keeping it, but using it for a different statue.
It would make sense to hold on to this.
Yes.
Yeah, but we'll see what they do.
A lot of people even called for it to be kept in its current state.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. That's another reason why I felt it so strongly about standing this at the time. I've been contacted by multiple museums about adding this to their personal collection, and honestly, I feel that one day this is going to be a valued archive of U.S. history.
Exactly, and I think we need that right now.
Absolutely.
There's too many things happening, but not that many being recorded, especially to this extent. And with the addition of it's not one scan; it's two instances of this, 6 months apart. It matters. There's nothing above there in June last year.
But then by January, they started to make their way up there. There's a few paintball marks, and you see Who Watches the Watchman, which is one of my favorites. In fact, in June, I don't know if I can get to it or even find it right now, but they're the same. It looks like the same person. It's the same handwriting. They have it in very small white lettering somewhere. It's either over here or over here. Here it is, right here. Let me see if I can pull it in. It's actually, the Who Watches the Watchman.
Oh, it's there. It's there.
Yeah, it's right here. Who Watches the Watchman? So it's in the same handwriting. A lot of the people that were coming here for the protest returned daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the schedule was, but they were there multiple times.
Well, it's become a point of not just a reference, but it brings the people together, and it creates a sort of a bond that it doesn't happen on any other street. It's on this particular street because people have a common goal, common interest, and it makes sense. So we don't know what's going to happen. It's not necessarily about what's going to happen. It's about the fact that you're able to preserve heritage.
The way I like to look at this is that, at the time I was doing it, I didn't know what was going to be the fate of the monument itself. But I wanted to make sure it was captured on those days that I was there. There was some part in my mind that was wondering if they were going to actually keep it up, if somehow or other the state was going to turn down the process of removing it. It was a very costly process to remove it, simply because of the size of the monument. But I wanted to make sure it was preserved in that state. It's kind of carved in digital stone, as I like to say.
Yeah, and that brings us to digital heritage, which seems to be the case because we're living through social media, we're living through video, we're living through YouTube, we're living through. So in terms of digital heritage, because this is, it's part of patrimony at this point, but we're talking about things that are not going to be there, or potentially not going to be there, in their physical form. How are we doing this? How is this transition going from a physical, tangible monument to something that carries with it a lot of emotional weight in its digital form, and it will continue to carry a lot of emotional weight with it long forward. Where do you see that play? What do you see that movement happening?
It's happening all around us right now. Even objects that we already have in our current archives are all being digitized. I did a big project with the U.S. Department of State in 2019, for example, where we went through their archives, some of their most valued, treasured pieces from the collection. This was at the State Department building, on the 6th floor, the Diplomatic Reception Hall. You've got original Ben Franklin's and Thomas Jefferson's, and all these paintings and sculptures and everything just there for us to scan. And there's several reasons for that. Number one, it increases accessibility. You can share this online now, and anybody can get access to this. Only a handful of people a year probably make it into the diplomatic reception hall of the State Department.
And the level of security
yes,
clearance you need.
You need to get to be secure just to get on the block, and then even more to get in the building, and even more so to get on that particular floor.
Correct.
So it increases accessibility, but it also allows a level of interaction with students, for example, that we just can't have in any other way. That particular project was set up so that students could actually 3D print some of the objects that we were scanning. There were congressional seals and things of that nature that I'm not sure if they've released it yet, but if they haven't, it should be sometime this year or early 2022.
Talk about national treasure making it available to the entire country.
It really was. So I view this actually as kind of an extension of that. This is something that can't be archived physically. The statue itself might be archived somewhere, but the plinth and everything about this environment, that's a snapshot in time. So I feel it's important to not only take pieces from museums, but to find things out in the real world and scan them and preserve them in the state that they were found.
Especially when they have this amount of weight
Absolutely.
with them and such an impact in terms of what is happening currently in our history,
Absolutely.
our contemporary history. So,
Not only that though, but everybody's talking about like the Metaverse and everything that's coming up. VR is a big thing. AR.
As you know, with the exhibition,
Absolutely.
quite a lot of that.
Yeah. So I've actually, the NFT world has been reaching out to me quite a bit, and
Yes.
they have this whole. It's all still very new to me, so I'm certainly not the expert. But there's
That's
this
our
whole.
next point of conversation.
That's this whole concept of metaverse. This monument was actually featured in as a virtual stage for a dance party in VR at one point.
Wow.
For example, I think they set up like a DJ booth on the front, and they had like a virtual DJ playing music. These are the types of things that I think we're just going to see more and more of moving forward. So I think it's important for us to capture this as much as possible.
Yes, but you were talking about NFTs, so let's go
Yeah.
into that kind of
Okay.
conversation.
Sure.
What is appealing about NFTs to the market, especially the art market? It seems like there's a way of preserving it, but what is appealing to you about NFTs and about preserving this?
It's my opinion that this piece is going to outlive me. Hopefully more of my work will outlive me. We're all only human. We're only here for a certain amount of time.
Immortality.
So I'm trying to take a multi-pronged approach to making sure that this is in multiple sectors. It's great to add it to museums, collections, are a totally different story. How do I get this into a private collector's hands?
Yes.
And I view NFTs as a solution to that issue. It's all still a very new world to me. I'm just now learning about it, and
It's kind of a new world to begin with.
it really is, yeah. But I'm kind of being onboarded, as they like to say right now, by a few OGs in the space, as they call themselves. Not my terminology, but going by what they're self-described as. So it's great. It's just another way for me to get it out into the world and to share this and keep it in the private sector.
Terry, that was an eye-opening interview that you and I did, and we talked about a lot of topics like heritage and culture and culture preservation and bridging this digital with what was left behind, basically. But I want to actually let you show us the installation itself, moving around the installation itself. So we did video of that at Pavilions, and I'd like to play that for you next.
Absolutely.
So the exhibit itself was developed here at EPFL. Your developers did a fantastic job with this. I give all the credit in the world to Sammy and the rest of the team. They put a lot of time into this. I was able to come up with an artistic vision, and they executed it without fail. Fantastic work. There are 3 main assets here. There's 2 models. We have scans from June of 2020 and January of 2021. Just before the exhibit opened, I actually scanned it one more time. So if the exhibit moves on to other sites in the future, we have more assets that can be added. There's also a panorama, 360 spherical panorama that's been added. This is interesting because it actually captures the entire site. So you can see the community that was being built around this. We had this fantastic, set of community gardens that were going, and this is in January. So there's not a lot of gardening going on in January, but they were still out here, getting things ready and really trying to keep this as a communal space. But one of the things that happened between the June and January scans is that they added these jersey walls around, and it just became another outlet for graffiti. Some of my favorite pieces are actually in these, and I encourage anybody that has the time to maybe check out the website that we've set up, where you can actually do a deep dive into this. But back to the models themselves, they each kind of had their own feeling and emotion. You can see that the Black Lives Matter banner was down during the January scan, whereas here in June it was it had been caught by the wind and it was blown up here, and everything was kind of being pushed around. But in June when I saw it, it was one, maybe two layers of graffiti deep in certain areas. There were still a lot of areas that hadn't been touched yet, but by January, it was 4 or 5 layers deep in most places. They had actually started to rise to the top. It looks like somebody had a paintball gun and kind of, lit the general up a little bit while he was, mounted on the top. And there's just more and more expression from a variety of different groups. We see everything from Black Lives Matter, which is the obvious thing here, to a lot of LGBTQ groups, as well as other socially conscious groups that were gathered in the area. It was a very joint effort and very communal parade through the city streets, with this being the kind of headquarters of most of the protests that were taking place in the city. So we do have the 2 different models, which you can see there. And some of my favorite pieces, for example, this one right here, let me see if I can get to it. It's pretty nice to see. I'm a little backwards on this, it's hard to do while I'm standing here. You can see right here it says, "Who watches the Watchman?" Yeah. That's one of my favorite pieces. Let's see, what else do we have here? Of course, the Christmas tree from January was one of my favorite. And the obvious one here is "Tear It Down." That was the very first thing I saw the first time I pulled into Monument Row. And I should probably mention too that this was the first time I'd ever visited Richmond. I drove past on 95 a couple of times on my way further south, but had never actually visited the city proper. So this was my first introduction to Monument Row. My path coming into the city led me directly to this monument first. And so this was my initial greeting. And I was greeted originally with this huge "Tear It Down" banner. It actually took quite a bit of work to get this to reconstruct as well as it did. It originally had a couple of holes and some tears in it, and I had to go through and kind of massage the data a little bit. Everything worked out in the end though. But there's just so many different stencils and graffiti pieces on here, and I still, every time I look at this, I still find more and more pieces that, and messages that I've never noticed. In the orthomosaic that was also created from this, which is kind of a very ultra high resolution, the same piece that you printed up front, I have a digital version that you can zoom in on, and you can actually see handwritten, like it looks like marker or pencil drawing, and those are some of my absolute favorite pieces because they're very personalized. This is somebody talking about their actual experience. It might be an entire paragraph or a couple of sentences, more so than just a BLM tag or something to that effect. So let's see. So these were the 2 scans that were done with the perfect timing in the world, or the worst timing in the world. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Just prior to the opening, we did have the monument itself come down. One thing that we were able to do was to pick up some of the live streams and compile some information, some video documentation of the monument itself coming down. We did want to make sure that was represented in the exhibit. If this does tour to other museums in the future, that might be something that we integrate into this so we don't have a side piece to it. But this is kind of the conclusion of the story. I thought it was very important to have this here. One of the things I loved the most about watching this as it was happening was that there was this big prediction early on that African Americans built this monument, and there was this, which is just mind-blowing when you stop and think about that for a minute. But there was a prediction, and I don't remember who it was that predicted it early on, but it was predicted that African Americans put this up, and one day African Americans would take it down. One of the greatest parts of the story of when it did come down is that the construction company that was hired by the state to remove it was owned by an African American. And he's actually on the top of the lift, kind of, getting everybody to clap and applaud as it was going on, and it just, I cannot lie, it brought a tear to my eye watching it. It really did.
Goosebumps.
Yeah, I have them right now, just thinking about it again. But it was, a nice fitting conclusion before leaving to depart for Switzerland to actually see it come down, days prior. I couldn't have been more thrilled to see it finally happen, because I was starting to get to the point where we weren't sure if it was going to happen.
Terry, thank you for taking us on that quick tour of the installation. What still comes to mind at the end of putting this project together? What still resonates after all of that for you?
Really the whole experience of being there and seeing how your team is able to preserve some of these sites, like the Lee Monument and other sites. I really see that as a sign of the future. That's the way that we're pushing forward. Our grandkids, our great grandkids, they're not going to open traditional paper textbooks. They're going to be learning from digital assets. And I think it's important for us to not only archive, what we see in front of us in museums, small objects, but sites. This is the type of technology that everybody's going to have access to, whether it's, getting a LiDAR scanner in your phone or, learning a little bit more about the craft. I do feel that this is a documentation type of documentation that we're going to see only more and more throughout the future.
Well put. And actually, it brings me to what your plans are next, because you are an instructor in 3D scanning, and droning and drones. And what's next for you? I know you have some quite interesting projects that you're working on.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, while I was in Europe, I actually made a quick trip over to Berlin and scanned several sections of the Berlin Wall. So I'm working on that right now in the studio. But one project that's more related to Lee is I'm actually crafting NFTs to help raise money for inner city STEM education, particularly focused on drones and photogrammetry. I feel that strongly about teaching the next generation of photogrammetrists and 3D scanners, 3D capture artists, whatever you want to call them, how to pick up the camera and how to capture things in 3D. So we're hoping to. We just had our first drop, as they like to say in the NFT world, yesterday during the Metaverse Music Festival. I have been porting some of these models over into the Metaverse world as well too. So kind of trying my hand at that. That's been quite an experience. But yeah, really just trying to push the technology and the education forward.
Just a side conversation, just one quick mention. This metaverse is popping up on pretty much every conversation we're having around deepfakes, and it seems like it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah. So we're living in Matrix times from the looks of it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
thank you, Terry.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it was a great experience. Thank you so much.
Terry, it's been a privilege for us to have you, not just part of this conversation, but part of the deepfakes art and stubble concept and idea. And it's timely, it's provocative, and it's definitely something that needs to be recorded. And I thank you for your work, and thank you again for joining us for the In Conversation series under the deepfakes art and stubble. Thank you so much, Terry. And thanks everybody that's tuned in today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.